Hello and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk About by Kangaroo Minds. I'm Vedika and today we have with us Ms. Kamal Malhi. Ms. Malhi is the founder of the Lotus Sutra Psychotherapy Centre as well as the co-founder of the Bodhicitta Meditation and Mindfulness Awareness Centre. She works with family and clinical counseling, CBT, REBT, de-addiction and relapse management therapies. Additionally, she is a certified teacher for mindfulness-based practices for pain reduction, stress management, depression, anxiety, as well as therapeutic healing. She has also been an educator for the last 4 decades. Our conversation with Ms. Malhi today is going to focus around parenting and the implications it can have for child mental health. However, before we begin, we would like to put out a trigger warning for our audiences. If at any point during this conversation, should you find yourself feeling triggered or distressed, we urge you to take a step back and look after yourself. Should you need any additional support resources, you can also find them on our website. And now, without taking up much time, we're going to dive in to hear more from her. Welcome to the episode, Ms. Malhi. It's lovely to have you with us today.
And I cannot begin to tell you how wonderful it is to be here, especially with you, Vedika, to see your own journey and to connect with people through you. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
No, I mean, thank you. I'm really looking forward to, the insights that you're going to bring to this conversation and the difference I think it's going to make to a lot of people.
I hope so. I hope it is of benefit to others. So it's my joy. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think I'm going to start off by asking you, since we're talking about parenting, and we know that there are different styles of parenting. So how do you think that, the parenting styles go on to impact the attachment styles which children build?
Right. So we know that a child has a desperate need to be attached to a parent. In fact, the human baby is one of the most dependent and weaker infants in the mammal kingdom per se. And really, since we began walking on 2 legs instead of all 4s, the structure of the parent itself, the body changed to be very narrow in the hips. The human head, therefore, is about the largest size that can be accommodated naturally for birthing within a framework like this. What this really means is that even though a child is born at a young age, at birth, they have absolutely no skills. It takes them a long, long time, almost a year and a half, to start walking, running. A giraffe or a cow or a calf, otherwise baby, right? They are born and they're up and running. So their motor skills, their developmental skills are already there compared to the human child. The human child has a far more need to be attached, definitely, but also nurtured. So a lot of the growth and development of a child that is intrinsic to its larger performance later in life happens actually within the first year, 0 to the first 2 or 3 years. Very critical. Attachment, therefore, continues, and breastfeeding, we know, is one way in which parents, mothers particularly, or the act of putting a child to sleep in bed, or the cuddling, that contact with the physical presence of a parent, this is the first bonding that happens. Now, a parent that is coming from a very, what should I say, negligent form of parenting cannot have the attachment to the child for many reasons. I could have a trauma. This could be my 4th child that I didn't really want. The child could be born within circumstances that are hard for me. And we have to look at it from many perspectives. Why a parent would neglect a child? So the parental neglect of a child has a huge impact. It is not just for the physical growth. And this is where most parents will compensate. They will give the child shelter and food and comfort. They'll give the child the necessary needs for their clothes and other physical things. They may even do the second thing, which is stimulate a child through visualization. Now imagine a child that is neglected and is in a dark room and is not allowed to see colors or light. Within a few months, this child will turn blind. We know that. We know that a child that is not stimulated mentally will not even have the desire later on in life to achieve, to inquire, to be motivated. So when certain sensory perceptions itself are not developed and a child is learning through sensory perceptions, then a child is also mirroring the environment in which it is. So if there's neglect in the parent, well, you stunted the child's personality in more than the physical way, and you may have not stimulated it enough, so the sensory perception gets stunted. But what happens to a child that is actually emotionally disconnected? And this, Vedika, is the part that most parents don't see the need of a child, their emotional connection to them. So if it is neglected, we know the consequences. What if a parent is extremely authoritative, my way or the highway? Then that child is only learning, I have to fit in all the time. I have not enough as who I am. I have to be something that actually suits the parent. So the child will behave and become, like if a parent, for instance, tells a child, you're too noisy, sit in a corner. This child may learn to self-soothe with a toy or without engaging visually or making contact with someone. It will definitely be stunted later in its relationships interpersonally with others. Right? Authoritarian parents also come from a very sense of feeling threatened by change. And if a child is actually upsetting the status quo, oh, your children are messy, life is difficult. If you can't adapt and adjust to the messiness and the noisiness and the disruption that a child brings in, then you want to present yourself as to be stronger. And for many people, parents, the voice of authority that they have in their head plays out to the child. Right? And then you have the other part of a child, a parent that just says, do what you want, it's okay, I'll support you. If I come from an attitude that everything is okay, is wonderful and it's teaching, then the parent learns this boundary within which it can enact and behave within. So the safety that a child would feel outside this parent and child attachment go on into a space where they are now threatened because everybody else is saying, you're not okay the way you are to demand and cry and get what you want, right? So to be in a position that balances all of this, right, is not to be authoritative, but authoritative in which you can give the boundary, but you give the boundary, you tell them the spaces in which a child can be, but you are there personally for them. And these, of course, were the traditional 4 ways in which people work. But today we have so many different ways of parenting. We have what we know, I know from as a teacher, we have these parents that we call helicopters that are just hovering around all the time, or coming to school. Why did my child not get that part in the play when she's more deserving? Tiger parents. Now, tiger parents, they do care. They care a lot. It's a very Asian concept also. But they structure the child's day from morning to night. And so you have to do your morning session before your morning before you go to school. And then you have to go for this class, for sport in that case. I mean, the tiger parent is an achiever. A lot of the time they are expecting the child to their needs, because life is competitive. There are these many opportunities out there. So a tiger parent would very often think that they are helping the child when they do that.
Right.
And then, of course, you have a free-range parent who is like, more farming, more accepting, that even at a very young age will let child discover life on their own terms. And so attachment styles will definitely change in a child depending on the demography of the a parent's family itself, joint
Right.
family, and therefore a full clan and a tribe that is living together. So lots of surrogate parents, that situation. And then you have a parent that is so immersed in their own career and their own family systems that are outside this child, right? That is their
Right.
work system, their career, or their other performances or duties to society, that they are negligent in their connection. In all of this, I will say one thing. The biggest problem a child faces is too much correction and not enough connection. Right?
Right.
Connection is what a child craves, is what a child needs to have meaning. Remember, child has mirror neurons. It's learning through you. How they connect with life, how they let life touch them, and they touch life depends on your connection.
Right. Miss, like another thing, I know we briefly spoke about like childhood experiences as well, but how do these sort of childhood experiences, both positive and negative, sort of impact a child in their adult life, especially when it comes to, their sense of self, or like, the relationships that they form with others?
So where do I get my sense of self from? It is not from very often within myself. It is a mirror that the world gives me. So if the world is hostile, if I am being told all the time that I'm not good enough, or what I'm doing is good, but your brother is better, or your that uncle's son, he's got into this university or in that school, and the fear is built up within a child, you're never going to achieve what the others have achieved. So fear-based parenting, if I am read by that fear-based parenting, my sense of identity of who I am is going to be limited. Add to it a trauma that happens later on. And children will face trauma, but how they process that trauma in child depends a lot on their own emotional well-being later. So I can be 22 in a 12-year-old body, 22 in a 22-year-old body, but the emotional self is stunted at 12 years because maybe I had a swimming accident, the boat capsized, but I never processed it and I ignored it. Or I was told it's okay, it's not a big deal. Something terrible has happened to you, but nobody understands with compassionate, this is what it feels like for you. If I was in your position and I got this 3 on 10 on my maths paper, this is how I would be feeling also. And then to come back and say, okay, let's talk about how you're feeling. What is it that you need? That is very often a utopian space for parents themselves to be. They find it silly. They have not received that. They don't understand the tools that are needed. So now I am going to be triggered, right? Supposing I have a parent that used to be a teaser and teased me a lot about maybe the way my hair was, or the way I ate, or the way I looked, or the way I can grow up in any time anybody else. Because now here's someone I both love and I'm fearful of. So now there's a confusement. There's a confusion between the child's mind about actually adulating the parent and at the same time having a sense of dread and fear and not being able to voice what they are feeling. This resentment that is coming in, this sense of love, hate, confusion disorganizes the child's emotional being. Now what happens? I grow older, I go into the school world and somebody makes the same joke about the teasing that I am sensitive to. I am triggered, but I may not be volatile, or maybe I will. Maybe I'll become the class bully. I don't know. And then later on in relationships, if my partner or somebody says something that feels equally threatening to me, then I will be retaliating, because now I need to protect my turf. It is a knee-jerk reaction. There's no response. There's no thinking about it. There is an overreaction very often to a wounded part of you. So triggers that have happened to us, or emotional distress that we have held within us for years, and then something happens, and then it may not be the worst catastrophe in the world, but it feels like that for me because I don't have the skills. I don't have the tools to actually come out of this space. So yes, not knowing what I am sensitive to emotionally at a younger age impacts the way I will react, or the choices of my career, or the work I will do. And someone, if I'm told, for instance, that, and we have in this, in India particularly, or in an Asian culture, this adjust karo attitude, there's this much resource, even in a bus, it's a 2-seater, but we will squeeze to make place for the third, adjust karo. And we are told that this is what we have to do. So we are told that, give up that toy. And I still remember my daughter telling me this, Mama, you keep telling me I should share my toys, but Papa never shares his toys. I said, what do you mean with his toys? He said, well, his car, his music system, his things that he likes, his TV, his watches, he doesn't share that. So, we do, kids are quick to pick these things up also. So there is a confusion of not having clarity then. Example of a parent who is misbehaving in their own life, or not misbehaving, but making poor choices and expecting a child to be better in their choosing or behavior.
One of the things that you mentioned early on was around like parental neglect. So what do you feel that, what does that neglect look like, and how does that impact, the mental health of a child?
So we know, first of all, what physical neglect will do to a child. We know that, the physical stunting, or the growth, or the fungal or the bacterial infections, or not getting the physical needs or nutrition that a child needs. We know about that. But we have to look also, we spoke about a little bit about the stimulation that a child needs, sensorial stimulation. And when that doesn't happen, how the faculties of learning themselves are impacted. Right. So more than just getting the food and the nutrition, you do need the motivation and the stimuli of an environment that is conducive to elaborating these. But what happens to a child who is emotionally neglected? Later on in life, we have seen, because a child needs attention, they can be attention seeking in other ways. They can be disruptors in a classroom. They can be more withdrawn. I can be either hyper or hypo. I can exhibit very risky behaviors. I can, for instance, later on in life, really even diseases like diabetes come up with neglect, emotional neglect. A child and a human being carries its pain, body, and its emotions in the physical body. So maybe later on, the tendency to have substance abuse may come, or an eating disorder may come, or maybe I may have poor oral health where I need to smoke or put something in my mouth regularly to give me that oral stimuli. Another thing that happens very often is also a child can completely withdraw, become depressed. So there's personality maladjustments that happen. I can have very poor self-regulation, so I can go from 0 to rage in next to no time. And this is again a marker of neglect as in a parent, or trauma that a child has visited. and has been ignored by the parent. Right?
Right.
It can also be very often, Vedika, that we don't know how to connect with ourselves. So we really don't have the ability to connect with another. I can therefore be very controlling of my environment because I'm terrified, and I can therefore, it's my anxiety that makes me want to tell you, put this here, put that here, do this, don't do that. And sometimes it's neither of this. I have been abandoned. Maybe if I have been abandoned by my own child, a parent, then I have this fear that I'm going to be thrown out of this relationship. So before I can be thrown out, let me throw you out. So I will turn around and say things like, I'm not going to be ready for this. I'm not going to be able to do that. So in other words, I actually become a self-sabotager. I sabotage myself. I don't ask anybody else to do it. We know that this is not just low intelligence that is making me do it. We know emotional intelligence, right? Because I don't even have the vocabulary words to enunciate the spectrum of my emotion, right? I just know I'm feeling bad. I just know that I am not good enough, and so there's something wrong with me. I probably need fixing, but I'm going to fix the world before I look at myself.
Right.
Right? Yes, and then it is also sometimes that this story comes out of self-preservation. Yes. And of course, we see story after story, whether it's Rwanda or whether it's Syria or now, yes, or even now in Ukraine, we hear about the human suffering. And then it becomes something I can't let in. It is the survival barrier that we build in. Right? It's not safe for me to feel this emotion. Yeah. So I can withdraw because it creates a lot of anxiety in me. But unless you really go through that feeling of you are me and you really become open to that sensitivity, it's very difficult for a human being to really accept the pain of another person.
It's another thing around parenting that comes up pretty often, but we don't talk about enough, is sort of the impact that parental conflict has on the mental health of the child. And, for instance, you may see it pan out in ways where, parents are competing with each other to prove who is the better parent. Or you would have, that the child is being dragged into the fight as almost like a shield. I mean, like, these are just some examples, but, could you tell us a little bit more on how that parental conflict plays out, on the children's mental health?
A lot of this comes from preconceived and preconditioned roles that a parent has, or what a mother should be and what a father should be. In these years, they are blending a little more, but they were very stark in certain areas. And then it was always the father that would go out of the house, and the traditional role of the mother to be only the stay-at-home homemaker. And therefore, when she felt there is a hierarchy over here, right? Where the father is so very often the threat would be used, if you don't do this, I will tell your father when he comes back. And he's going to get angry. Now the father is used as a tool of being demonized in a way that is going to be the aggressor, because you do this otherwise. So now the mother is already projecting this thing of helplessness. This was a more traditional way of parenting, which was damaging enough as it was. Today, we find that the child is supposedly the equal responsibility of both parents. But we also know that we have differences that are individual. It doesn't mean that I'm the mother or maternal instincts would automatically be there for me. As a father, I may be more emotionally attuned to my child's needs, or vice versa. A lot of the conflict therefore comes over parenting also. Yes, I may have my own differences over there, but it also comes from the need of understanding and connecting with the child. competition now, therefore, and it has stepped in even into the parenting role. Am I the better parent, or are you? So, the conflict is about the child, but they are arguing with each other. In this scenario, the child feels the sense of blame. It is doing something wrong that is making the two parents fight about it. So now the burden of trying to appease both the parents is enormous on the child, and the child can never meet the need, so it blames itself, and so it withdraws. This happens time and time again when parents have a separation or a divorce, or they're living in different cities. The child tends to blame itself. It's learned this blame game very early in life, and now it turns on itself. Very often also a parent will try to score points with the parent in front of the child, without understanding that I am my child's security. And when I'm in a volatile, unregulated or dysfunctional way, if I'm being aggressive, abusive, or I'm trying to dominate and this child's whole world is terrified. I've seen children hide from parents and lock themselves away. Huge eating disorders coming into children as a result of the conflict that parents are facing. Children that face puberty very early in life. So now when a parent doesn't have the awareness to be able to structure and control themselves in a situation, the spillover is the child. He is the most vulnerable part of this equation. So it is still forming, this is still not, as we said, this child grows out more from the body than within the body. It doesn't know how to survive. So the emotional needs of the child that is stunted in this moment, this trauma of this raised voice of one of the parents who said, I'm walking out of the house now, right? Now, anybody else that threatens this child later on in life, I'm leaving you, is going to bring up this whole ogre of this whole vision of who life is going to be like without them. So abandonment phobia can start right there, because a parent has threatened to leave the other, or the other parent has created a deep sense of anxiety that disorganizes the safety net of a child. And so again, because I'm unregulated or dysfunctional or hyper emotional in my outbursts, this is the key with which a child learns later on in life to behave and become. So there are very many times signals that tell you this as a teacher or outside, right? We know when a child's behavior becomes withdrawn, or when a child who is normally curious and motivated now has this deadpan look on their face, or they have this child that is one person in school, but come the bell to go home, and then they become slow at packing their bag to go home, or the one that is playing game. Food becomes a power with the child then, right? Either I won't eat or I'll eat too much. And it becomes the way of filling this hole in the heart. We know that, when there is a threat perception, red flags are going up, adrenaline and cortisone drench the body. We know it impacts the vagus nerve, but for a child, it just feels the hollowness in its heart, in its belly, the butterfly feeling. And then it has to hold back because the environment isn't safe. So they build walls emotionally. And then I'm not allowed to speak what I want to. So there's this constriction in my throat. We seldom ask a child, what is happening to you physically? We ask a child, what do you think? Right? We ask a child, maybe even what you need. But we seldom ask a child in this moment, Beta, how are you feeling? Is something happening in your stomach? Are you feeling a heaviness in your head? Is there a sense of being achy in some part of your body? So, in order to decode the child's emotions, it's important to get into the viscera of the body where the feeling lies to make that connection. When my eyes become big like this and I am surprised, then I'm like that. So my voice and my breathing stops for a minute. This is surprise. We don't make these connections for a child. So the child also grows up not even knowing what it is experiencing. It doesn't have the vocabulary. So it can't understand it. It just knows it's good or it's a bad feeling. So if it's a bad feeling, maybe I'm to blame. If it's a good feeling, then I have to keep doing what I'm doing to feel good. I have to keep doing this.
Right. You mentioned some of the signs, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more, especially from a perspective of a third party who's like an adult who could be, a healthcare professional, a mental health professional, or even an educator working with children. What are some signs that they could look out for, which would suggest that the child might be having some difficulties at home?
So here's two very easy. One is the physical appearance of a child, first of all, right? We know, okay, just seeing a child, if it has been groomed or not, or neglected or not, or coming from home with its work in his bag packed or his physical needs, I mean, clothes are clean, simple things like that. We also look into seeing how a child is behaving, right? So is a child or an adult for that matter threatened if I'm sitting too close to it? Is first of all offer multiple options for a person to sit in when they come, right? Don't just be here with two chairs in front of you, so that is where it's me and you, that kind of thing. I think you start looking at body language. We know when a person is, withdrawing or turning away, how much eye contact they're making. We know also with how fidgety they are and how they can be more at ease. We pay attention to breathing. And here's what a person really needs to look at are micro changes, micro nuance changes. When I said this, you looked away. Or that when I felt this, I suddenly felt a tension in your shoulders. So you have to be very vigilant and observant to see how the other person is not just processing the environment, but the dialogue or the visual images that are being decoded in that person's brain. One very important and essential need here is to understand the personality of a person comes from their personal reality. Okay, so my personal reality is going to create my personality. If my personal reality is life is threatening, then I may be in my personality more timid. So my voice modulation will be a softer one, or I may be looking at you to seek approval, to seek you doing this. Yes, yes. Right? So it depends a lot. Or I may just be someone who feels safer when I can dominate an environment. And so I may be louder and more boisterous. So the other person has to, as a mental health worker, you have to always modulate the process. You can't modulate the content always, but you can modulate the process. And you can do it by sometimes slowing down the way you talk. You can do it sometimes by giving gaps in the way you speak. You can sometimes looking straight and directly into somebody's eyes can be very offensive to that person, right? So you have to be able to look at your responses, how they are being received and mirrored by the other person. At all times, we want them, as we know, to come into their prefrontal cortex. We want them to be safe, to come into their sense of wellness in order to not feel threatened, to bypass, because they're already feeling threatened. They're already coming from a feeling that the environment is difficult for me or stressing full, or there is an anxiety that is created in me, or I'm not sleeping, there's something wrong with me at the end of the day. So the ability to put the other person at ease differs from everybody.
One more aspect around being, an adult in a child's life is, like if you're a teacher or, if you're working with children, how would you help the child, or, how would you help address these issues if you feel that the parents themselves are not responsive to these conversations? Because many times it's not that easy to, speak to a parent where you feel that there is a problem.
So we have any issues over here, like, supposing the parent themselves is an alcoholic, right? There's nothing that the child can do about the substance abuse that a child is witnessing a parent do, or a parent is, for instance, physically abusive to the other parent, right? Now, the consequences are never only felt by the parent, it spills over to the child. In some ways, the child has to become an adult and parent the parent, which is a very unhealthy place to be in, to keep telling a parent what they should do. So the better thing is to give the child safety to be able to first realize that, there is a resource person that it can turn to. A lot of the physical safety a child will feel to unburden its so-called family secret, right, comes from a sense of confidentiality or the one-on-one relationship a teacher builds with its students. Now, I know and you know, Vedika, that without this one-on-one building, that seeing every child is unique and special with their own reality, that no child is going to open up to their hidden deep dark secrets because it's already coming from shame. So trust is one of the biggest, and confidentiality. That is the first thing, that a child is therefore used to unburden. We need to unburden the guilt and tell the child, it's not your fault, but there is a way in which we can help you that we need to explore. At all times, you have to be safe with her. This is important, right? So we start with that. And we do bring the parents in, and it's sometimes difficult to bring the two parents in, because one is willing, the other isn't, or whatever. Sometimes it is even important for you to make a house visit in a case like this, where the child is not present. It gives you a lot more understanding about the environment of the child when you walk into a child's home. So sometimes that's needed, to make a home visit. And then to be able to tell the parent that, look, whatever it is, this child needs an adult supervisor that will meet its needs. So to give multiple options to this parent, that this is what you could do. You could go to that counselor, or you could go to this teacher, or maybe there is an aunt or an uncle that we can temporarily work with. If the child's basic safety is being threatened, and that also happens if there is abuse happening for the child, then we need to put those structures into place for the child to be safe without alienating either parent. It's tricky, but even a parent who is coming from a way of functioning that is harmful to the child has a need for counseling themselves. They too have their own trauma to work through. So being sensitive that there is no right, there is no wrong, they are shades of gray, there is no must and should, and that we have to be inclusive of everyone's stories, everyone's challenges, and to come to understanding of what it is that we now, the three of us, can do to create a space that builds security, protection, safety, in which this child can thrive. And very often the analogy of a seed and a sapling is good to give to the parent, right? It's to be able to say, okay, it has a rich soil, but the sun is so harsh, or there is no water, right? So then, is this sapling going to grow? It has the potential to be that tree that is laden with fruit out there and to give sustenance, but it may not. And so, more than anything else, the environment of what a child needs to be nurtured, that sapling to grow into that banyan tree or the mango tree. And again, to know that the fruit will ripen in its own season. I am not, somebody that you can box in. I may be a later bloomer. And we know this, Vedika, that the real brain of balance comes in only in your late 20s, right?
Right.
By the time children, we know that the real development of, now we know that the reptilian or the amygdala, the survival brain is the first to develop. We know that the limbic system develops later. But how long does it take you to really come to a more creative understanding of making both the left and the right brains merge and meet? It takes a lot of time. And by this time, personalities are formed. And so are attitudes about who you are and what you can't be. And then becomes in adulthood the relearning or the reparenting of yourself.
Right.
And that takes you from a comfort zone to a fear zone to a learning zone. And then finally it takes you into the zone where you are now absolutely evolving and safe. And so there's no learning, there's just growth and growth and growth.
Right. So, there's one more thing which you did briefly touch upon earlier was, how like a parent's own experiences, be it with their mental health or even when it comes to like intergenerational trauma, like how do you think that sort of plays in more specifically into, like the kind of way that they're going to have that parenting equation with their child?
So it's very simple. I can only give you who I am. I can give you what I am. If I have, for instance, been exposed to a situation where there was a fire in my house growing up and I'm traumatized by that, I'm going to be extremely protective and fearful of anything that I'm going to say is going to be dangerous for you. So I will never let you take the initiative to do anything. I will never let you do something that is risk-taking because my fear transmits to you. You are precious to me and you have made a choice. So I will never let you be a person, for instance, who goes out and makes mistakes. Now, this need, therefore, to be a superhuman perfectionist in life, it spills over. I am unable to accept my imperfections. Because I have never been taught that I can't trust myself to fail. So a lot of what I am, if I don't sort out myself, my traumas, if I as an adult don't visit them, they are going to go on to the next generation. A parent who has, for instance, lost one of their own parents at a very young age may want to overcompensate by trying to be the emotional buddy and friend that they never had. Right? Or they can just be, because they are boxed in and emotionally unavailable themselves, care desperately about their parents, about their child, but not know the language or vocabulary to make that child feel valued and it's okay. So they just hover around maybe and not say anything. And where you need to know is that I'm seen. A child needs to know I'm heard. A child needs to know I matter. Right? If I ignore that because this is my way of controlling and healing myself, then this is what I offer you. So definitely, parents need to be very vigilant about their own triggers and traumas before they become parents. And yet we don't, we aren't. There's that biological clock these days we talk about, must have your kids at a certain age, and you must do the tick-offs in the to-do list, go to the right school, university, get married to the right person, and have kids at the right stage. And then these kids must go to the right school and da-da-da-da-da. So the cycle goes on.
So really. Sorry, so do you feel, sometimes when you would have, like children who've grown up hearing things that, like, you're not good enough, or, that nobody's going to love you, or you're never going to be successful, or, nothing's going to work out for you, or everybody's going to leave you, those kind of statements, how do you think that plays out on children?
So labels in any form, right, restrict and stunt the growth and the possibilities of a child of any kind. We know now that, there is this, okay, so there's this story about the zoo in which there is this beautiful tiger who is, this white tiger that everybody comes, and been in a cage, and then they say, listen, this is very cruel, and we build an open space with lots of things to stimulate it outside. But the tiger no longer wants to go into that space. It is safe in an unsafe place, in other words. It becomes something for the tiger. What is a known devil becomes a soothing space. So to see myself as unworthy because I've been taught that I'm unworthy is to make me later on in life to go into the workforce where a boss can expect me to work from 9 at night to 9 in the morning to 10 at night, and I'm not going to complain. And I think that's good, because now every time I have complained, I face very poor consequences. And so I, become this people pleaser later on in life, or I become the fault finder, or I become something that is basically trying to survive, right? These are all survival adaptations that a child makes, and it learns to be comfortable even in a hostile situation. So I'll give you another example. Children very often who have got dividends from being sick, my stomach is paining or my head is aching, I'm not going to school. And then suddenly the parent who has been negligent for the last few days drops everything. No, my child is not well. So now the child has learned, I can use my sickness to get attention.
Right.
And it continues later on in life. I can become overwhelmed by a situation, then I get these migraine attacks, or then I get this irritable bowel movement syndrome, or I get something that is recurring, almost like look at autoimmunity, for instance, and autoimmune diseases, where the body is highly inflamed. So most diseases are inflammatory. Maybe, okay, if there's too much sodium, the brain will shrink, but mostly it is, and you get a mosquito bite and it will flare up. So the body's whole response to a threat is to become bigger, right? So weight gain. Or sometimes I may shrink completely because I've become bulimic, because I don't deserve to eat. This is all the eating disorders, for instance, are a very strong way of indicating that a child is being labeled or mistreated at home because it doesn't feel safe. And the second way is really to see a child that is becoming more attention seeking, bullying. Bullying again is a cry for help. And the same, yes, and a child that is consistently actually very intelligent, but doesn't think it needs to work at its studies, for instance. It doesn't need to complete a task. Or a child that has even learned to procrastinate till the last minute, and then there's a hullabaloo, and then now I have to do it, submit what should have been worked on. These are all signs of emotional dysregulation.
Right. So, with all that being said, how would you say that, parents can work towards building safe spaces or, encouraging conversations about mental health with their children?
Darling, it's all about connection, again and again and again. We should not correct as much as we connect. I am told that a young child of under 3 today is corrected almost once every 3 to 7 minutes. What is this doing to the attention of a child? It's withdrawing into it's really the attention span of a child is always being coming from a feeling that my environment, I'm going to be ticked off, I'm not good enough, I'm not good. So again, use your correction sparingly when needed. Yes, it is needed, but use it as a tool to teach and educate, not as a tool to belittle or to help you feel better about yourself. Because my anger, if I have done something wrong, please apologize. This is a human being over there. And it's teaching the child that I am no different from you. I make mistakes, and to own it up, right? So to be able to come down to that level. And there are certain times when a child is more receptive to parental contact. You know, you may want to correct a child, but don't do it during these 3 times: at sleep time, meal time, and bathing time. These are the most vulnerable times when a child is just woken up or getting ready or brushing their teeth, and you're trying, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, and rush the child because the school bus is going to be missed. It's your anxiety. It's your anxiety. Learn to wake up. If you know your child needs more time to get ready in the morning, don't pass on your anxiety. Make the child sleep earlier. And you know, it's again a time of being flexible. So if I need a child to sleep, I can say a child can go to sleep anytime between 7:30 and 9. That's fine. Right? I don't have to say it's 8 o'clock, go to sleep right here, right now. Right? It's not an automaton. And a child that doesn't want to finish all the food on its table plate, we say, okay, you give it a way out also sometimes. Okay, maybe you don't want to eat everything. What is the part of your food that you can eat? What are you willing to eat, right? What do you think we can do with what is left over now? Involve the child also in the problem solving. That's another thing. And the third, and this is perhaps a more important thing, is to keep asking the child what it needs. It works every time. How are you feeling and what do you need? Two mantras a parent must have to connect with the child. How are you feeling, Vita? And instead of asking a child, what did you do in school or how was your day? Because the child is just going to say, nothing, I played, it was okay, nothing happened. Be specific. Ask your child, what color was your teacher's clothes today, right? Who did you sit next to in break time today? Even that will tell you a lot. Oh, do you know what so-and-so had for lunch today, right? Or was there a new word you learned today? Be a little more specific in your questioning when you are as a parent to connect with the child. And the other, and this is another thing that you have to do, you have to be contemporary for your child. You can't impose, what is happening out in your life and what you read and what you did and not be contemporary. So you, for instance, and this is something I would like to talk about really, is about screen times, right? Now, screen times, we know it's going to be there in the child's environment. The child is not going to be screen free wherever it goes. Right? Even from the car, GPS system to the wherever you go. And now I'm told there are even phones that are coming on a ring, forget the watch. Wow. So it's going to be there in a child's world wherever it goes. There are huge hoardings and huge screens wherever they go. The idea is to understand that you need to use them and they don't use you. All these gadgets have been prepared by brilliant minds and psychologists and engineers that want you to get a dopamine rush with that like, with that tick, with that feeling that, you can keep going down and down, and the more followers and the more likes you are, it's real. It's supposed to make you feel good. For a little while, maybe it does. But then what happens when you're trolled? What happens when someone posts a very ugly picture of you on their site, right? You can't control what other people are doing. So again, this kind of connection within not only the parent and the child, but within the gadgets and the child is important. Right. Because the gadgets have become something that a child is spending a lot more time engaging with than even a parent now.
Right.
So yes, your own example is the best example.
Right.
Shame is another thing, Vedika, I would like to talk about. Shame is something that a child really is hampered by, because there is a big difference here between guilt and shame. Okay? And I think it's very important for a parent to understand when they are uh, correcting a child not to impose shame. Guilt is still okay, because guilt says I can, shame says I can't. Guilt says I did something wrong, and so I have to make amends. Like, I've taken a book and not returned it. I've done something wrong. But shame is that I'm a bad person for not returning that book. I took some. So then if a parent makes this all about a child's sense of behavior being the person is bad and not the action is bad, there's a big difference right there.
Right. I think you shared a lot of insights with us today, and I think it's been very informative. And to wrap up, I just want to ask you one thing, that if you had something to say to someone who's watching this or listening to this right now, who's having a hard time with their mental health, what would it be?
There's nothing wrong with you. Every single human being goes through life that gets stuck and unstuck. And at different stages in your life, you too will be stuck and unstuck. The important thing to know is, one, don't personalize this. It's not always about you per se. During COVID, it was a collective grief that the world experienced. So it's not always depression in a space like this. Is not always something I have done wrong or there's something wrong with me. So don't personalize it. The second, it's not permanent. This will pass. There are resources, there are places that you can go for soothing, for attention. There's a lot of research that has been done in mental health. There is no stigma today, and there shouldn't be, to reach out. If I was physically with a broken bone, I would go off to the doctor, to the emergency care. But if I find that I am unable to get out of my bed or to take care of myself emotionally, or I find that I'm breaking down and crying a lot, or that I'm just getting violently angry, please seek help. There is resources available. So what you are facing is not going to be permanent either. So it's not about you, it's not personal, it's not permanent. And the third, this is even more important, it's not pervasive. It's not all of you. Your mental health is a part of your being. There are skills and talents and other things within you also that are working. Look at that. So we say also, it's not only the half full or the half empty, it's both. There is stuff that is going right for me. I do have a home and a safe environment to live in. And at the same time, there is this issue happening. So it's not pervasive. It is a part of what is happening to me. So I don't need to give it undue attention also to think that there is something desperately bad or wrong with me. Everything has, if there's a problem, there is a solution for it. There is a solution. It may take a little while to find it, but there is a solution. And if you need help, please, you've got Kangaroo Minds there, you've got me here, you've got people all around you. Maybe the one that you really need right now to talk to is your hairdresser, or maybe the person who, all that you really need is to play with your dog for a little while, or just get into your car and scream and let it out. Maybe that works for you. But seek help. There is no stigma today. It's okay to be not okay. It's okay. You're fine. And there is help.
Thank you so much, Miss, for all your insights and for your time and, for joining us today for this conversation. And I really hope that, for people who listen to this, that they're able to find some hope as well as find some answers through everything that you've shared. And lastly, for anyone who's watching or listening to this today, if you're having a hard time with your mental health, just know that, things get better. And, even as Ms. said, that there's always help out there and there's always hope. So till next time, please stay well and stay healthy.